The Story of Beowulf, translated from Anglo-Saxon into modern English prose, by Ernest J.B. Kirtlan, Part 3. Then was it bidden that heart should be decked by their hands on the inside, and many there were of the men and wives who adorned that wine-hall, the guest chamber, and the tapestries shone along the walls, brocaded with gold, many a wonderful sight for every man who stareth upon them. And that bright dwelling was greatly marred, though within it was fast bound with iron, yet the door hinges had sprung apart. The roof alone escaped all safe and sound, when the monster turned to flight despairing of life and doomed for his crimes. Nor will it be easy to escape from that fate, whosoever may try to, but he shall get by strife the ready place of the children of men, of the soul-bearers, who dwell upon earth, by a fate that cannot be escaped, where his body shall sleep after the banquet fast in the tomb. Then was the time for Halfdine's son to go into the hall, when the king himself would partake of the banquet. Nor have I ever heard tell that any people in greater numbers bore themselves better about their treasure-giver, and the wealthy ones sat down on the bench and rejoiced in their feeding, and full courteously their kinsmen took many a mead-cup. They, the stout-hearted Hrothgar, and Hrothulf in the high hall, and within was heart filled with friends. By no means were the Danes the while framing treacheries. Then the son of Halfdine gave to Beowulf the golden banner, the decorated staff banner as a reward for his conquest, and the helm and the byrnie. And many a one saw the youth bear in front the bejewelled sword. Beowulf took the cup in the hall, nor did he need to be ashamed of the fee-gift in the presence of warriors. Nor have I heard tell of many men giving to others on any ale-bench 4 gifts gold-decked in friendlier fashion. The outside rim wound with wires gave protection to the head on the outer side around the crown of the helmet, so that many an heirloom could not hurt fiercely the helmet that was hardened by being plunged in cold water when the shield warrior should attack the angry one. The protector of earls commanded 8 horses to be brought in under the barriers, with bridles gold-plated, and a vari-colored saddle was fixed upon one of them, decked out with treasures, and this was the battle-seat of the High King, when the son of Halfdine would be doing the sword-play. Never in the van did it fail the warrior so widely kenned when the helmets were falling. Then the prince of the Danes gave to Beowulf the wielding of them both, of horses and weapons, and bade him well enjoy them. And thus, in manly fashion, the famous chieftain, the treasure-guarding of heroes, rewarded the battle onslaught with horses and treasures, so as no man can blame them, whoever will be saying rightly the truth. Then the Lord of Earls, as he sat on the mead bench, gave glorious gifts to each one of those who had fared with Beowulf over the ocean ways, and heirlooms they were. And he bade them atone for that one with gold whom formerly Grendel had wickedly killed, as he would have done more of them unless Almighty God, and the spirit of Beowulf, had withstood Weird. The Creator ruleth all of humankind, as still he is doing, and good understanding is always the best thing, and forethought of mind. And he who long enjoys here the world in these strife days shall be biding both pleasant and loathsome fate. Then was there clamour and singing together in the presence of the battle-prince of Halfdine, and the harp was sounded, and a song often sung, when Hrothgar's scop would tell forth the hall-mirth as he sat on the mead-bench. When fear was befalling the heirs of Finn, the hero of the Halfdanes, and Naef of the Danes must fall in the slaughter of the Frisian people, not in the least did Hildebur need to be praising the troth of the Jutes. For sinlessly was she deprived of her dear ones in the play of swords of children and brothers. By fate they fell, wounded by arrows, and she was a sad woman. Nor without reason did the daughter of Hawk mourn their doom. When morning light came, and she could see under the sky the murder of her kinsmen, where she before in the world had the greatest of joy. For warfare took away all the thanes of Finn, so that he could not in the place where they met fight any warfare at all with Hengist, nor seize from the prince's thane the woeful leavings by fighting. But they offered him terms, so that they all made other room for them on the floor, and gave them halls and a high seat, that they might have half the power with the children of the Jutes. And the son of Folkewalda honoured the Danes every day with fee-givings, and bestowed rings on the troop of Hengist, yea, even the great treasures plated with gold, so that he would be making the kin of the Frisians bold in the beer-hall. Then they swore on both sides a treaty of peace. Finn swore with Rengist, and all without strife, that he held in honor the woeful remnant by the doom of the wise men, and that no man there by word or work should break the treaty, or ever annul it through treacherous cunning, though they followed the slayers of the ring-giver, all bereft of their lord as was needful for them. But if any one of the Frisians, by daring speech, should bring to mind the murderous hate between them, then should the edge of the sword avenge it. Then sworn was that oath, and massive gold was lifted up from the hoard. Then was Naif, the best of the warriors, of the bold Danes, ready on the funeral pyre, and the blood-stained shirt of mail was easily seen, the golden boar, in the midst of the flame, the iron-hard boar, and many an Etheling destroyed by wounds. Some fell on the field of death. Then Hildebert commanded her very own son to be thrust in the flames of the pyre of Naif, his body to be burned and be put in the fire. And great was the moaning of the mother for her son, and dirge-like lamenting as the warrior ascended. And the greatest of slaughter fires wound its way upward towards the welkin, and roared before the cavern. Heads were melting, wounds burst asunder. Then blood sprang forth from the wounds of the body. Flame swallowed all. That most cruel of ghosts, of both of those folks whom battle destroyed, their life was shaken out. Then warriors went forth to visit the dwellings which were bereft of friends, and to look upon the land of the Frisians, the homesteads and the high town. And Hengist was still dwelling with Finn, that slaughter-stained winter, all bravely without strife, and he thought on the homeland, though he could not be sailing his ringed ship over the waters. The sea boiled with storm and waged war with the wind, and winter locked up the ice-bound waves, till yet another year came in the court, as it still doth, which ever guards the seasons, and the glory-bright weather. Then winter was scattered, and fair was the bosom of the earth, and the wanderer strove to go, the guest from the court. And much more he thought of vengeance for the feud than of the sea voyage, as to how he could bring about an angry encounter, for he bore in mind the children of the Jutes. And so he escaped not the lot of mortals, when Hunlafing did on his arm the best of swords, the flashing light of the battle, whose edge was well known to the Jutes. And dire sword bale after befell the fierce-minded Finn, even in his very own home, when Guthlaf and Oslaf lamented the grim grip of war and the sorrow after sea journeys, and were charging him with his share in the woes. Nor could he hold back in his own breast his fluttering soil. Then again was the hall adorned with the bodies of foemen, and Finn was also slain, the king with his troop, and the queen was taken. And the warriors of the Danes carried to the ships all the belongings of the Earth King, such as they could find in the homestead of Finn, of ornaments and jewels. They bore away also the noble wife Hildebert down to the sea away to the Danes, and led her to her people. So a song was sung, a lay of the gleeman, and much mirth there was, and great noise from the benches. And cup-bearers offered wine from wondrous vessels. Then came forth Queen Wealhtheow in her golden circlet, where the two good men were sitting, the uncle and his nephew, and still were they in peace together, and each true to the other. Likewise Unferth the spokesman sat there at the foot of the lord of the Danes, and each of them trusted Unferth's good heart, and that he had a great soul, though he was not loyal to his kinsman at the swordplay. Then spake the queen of the Danes, "Take this cup, O my liege lord, thou giver of rings. Be thou right joyful, thou gold friend to men. Do thou speak mild words to the Geats, as a man should be doing. Be glad of thy Geats, and mindful of gifts. Now thou hast peace both near and far. There is one who told me that thou wouldest have the battle hero for thy son. Now heart is all cleansed, the bright hall of rings. Enjoy whilst thou mayest many rewards, and leave to thy kinsmen both folk and a kingdom, when thou shalt go forth to look on eternity. I know my glad Hrothulf will hold in honor this youth if thou, O Hrothgar the friend of the Danes, dost leave the world earlier than he. I ween that he will yield good to our children if he remembers all that has passed, how we two worshipfully showed kindness to him in the former days, when he was but a child." Then she turned to the bench where were her sons, Hrothric and Hrothmund, and the children of heroes, the youths all together. There sat the good man Beowulf of the Geats, by the two brothers. And the cup was borne to them, and a friendly invitation given to them in words. and twisted gold was graciously proffered him, 2 arm ornaments, armor and rings, and the greatest of neck rings, of which I heard tell anywhere on the earth. Ne'er heard I of better hoard jewels of heroes under the sky, since Hama carried away the Brasinga men to the bright city, ornaments and treasure vessel. It was he who fled from the cunning plots of Eromanric and chose eternal gain. Hygelac of the Geats next had the ring, he who was the grandson of Swerting, when under the standard he protected the treasure and defended the plunder. And Weird carried him off when he, because of pride, suffered woes, the feud with the Frisians. Then carried he the jewel, the precious stones over the sea, he who was the ruling prince, and he fell under shield. And the life of the king and the coat of mail and ring together came into the possession of the Franks. And worse warriors plundered the slaughter after the war, and the corpses of the Geats held the field of death. The hall resounded with noise when Wealhtheow spoke these words in the midst of the court. Enjoy this ring, dearest Beowulf, and use this coat of mail, these national treasures, and good luck befall thee. Declare thyself a good craftsman, and be to these boys gentle in teaching, and I will be mindful of thy guerdon for that thou hast so acted, that men will esteem thee far and near for ever and ever, even as wildly as the sea doth encompass the windy earth walls. Be a noble Etheling as long as thou livest. I give thee many treasures. Be thou kindly indeed to my sons, joyful as thou art. For here is each earl true to his fellow, and mild of mood, and faithful to his liege lord. Thanes are gentle, the people all ready. O ye warriors who have drunk deep, do as I tell you. She went to the seat where was a choice banquet, and the men drank wine. They knew not Weird, the fate that was grim as it had befallen many an earl. Then evening came on, and Hrothgar betook him to his own quarters, the prince to his resting place, and a great number of earls kept guard over the palace, as often they had done in former days. They laid bare the bench-board, and spread it over with beds and bolsters. And one of the beer servants, eager and fated, went to his bed on the floor, and they set at his head war-shields that were bright. And over the Etheling, there on the bench was easily seen the towering helmet and the ringed barony, the glorious spear. It was their wont to be ready for war both at home and in battle, at whatever time their lord had need of them. The season was propitious. Then they sank down to sleep, and sorely some of them paid for their evening repose, as full often it had happened to them since Grendel came to the Gold Hall and did evil, until an end was made of him, death after sins. It was easily seen and widely known to men that an avenger survived the loathsome one, for a long time after the war sorrow. A woman, the mother of Grendel, a terrible wife, bore in mind her woes, she who was fated to dwell in the awful lake in the cold streams, since Cain became a sword-slayer to his only brother, his father's son. He then went forth marked for the murder, and fled from human joys and dwelt in the wastes. And thence he awoke many a fatal demon, and Grendel was one of them, the hateful fierce wolf, who found the man wide awake awaiting the battle. And there was the monster at grips with him. Yet he remembered the main strength, a wide and ample gift which God gave to him, and trusted in the favor of the Almighty for himself, for comfort and help, by which he vanquished the enemy and overcame the hell sprite. Then he departed abject, bereft of joy, to visit the death place, he the enemy of mankind. But his mother, greedy and sad in mind, would be making a sorrowful journey that she might avenge the death of her son. She came then to Hart, where the Ring-Danes were asleep in that great hall. Then soon there came misfortune to the earls when the mother of Grendel entered the chamber. Yet less was the terror, even by so much as the craft of maidens. The war terror of a wife is less than that of men beweaponed, when the sword hard bound and forged by the hammer, and stained with blood, cuts the bore on the helmet of the foe with its edge. Then in the hall the hard edge was drawn, the sword over the seats, and many a broad shield heaved up fast by the hand, and no one heeded the helmet nor the broad shield when terror seized upon them. She was in great haste. She would go thence her life to be saving when she was discovered. Quickly she had seized one of the Aethelings, fast in her grip, when the fourth she was fleeing away to the fenland. He was to Hrothgar the dearest of heroes, in the number of his comrades by the two seas, a powerful shield warrior, whom she killed as he slumbered, a youth of renown. Beowulf was not there. To another place was assigned after the treasure gift had been bestowed on the famous Geat. Then a great tumult was made in heart, and with bloodshed she had seized the well-known hand of Grendel, her son, and care was renewed in all the dwellings, nor was that a good exchange that they on both sides should be buying with the lives of their friends. Then was the wise king, the hoar-battle warrior, rough in his mood when he came to know that the dearest of his chief thanes was dead and bereft of life. And Beowulf quickly was fetched into the bower, he, the man all victorious. And at the dawning went one of the earls, a noble champion, he and his comrades, where the proud man was waiting, to see whether the all-wielder will ever be causing a change after woe spells. And the battle-worthy man went along the floor with his band of followers. The hallwood was resounding, so that he greeted the wise man with the words, "The Lord of the Danes," and asked him if he had had a quiet night in spite of the pressing call. Hrothgar spake, he, the Lord of the Danes, "Ask not after our luck, for sorrow is renewed to the folk of the Danes. Aesir is dead, the elder brother of Jormunlaf. He was my counselor and my rune-teller, my shoulder companion, when we in the battle protected our heads, when troops were clashing and helmets were crashing. He was what an earl ought to be, a very good atheling. Such a man was Aesir, and a wandering slaughter-guest was his hand-slayer in heart. I know not whether that dire woman exulting in carrion, and by her feeding made famous, went on her journeys. She was wreaking vengeance for the feud of thy making, when thou killest Grendel, but yesternight, in a violent way, with hard grips, because all too long he was lessening and destroying my people. He fell in the struggle, gave his life as a forfeit, and now comes another, a mighty man-scather, to avenge her son, and the feud hath renewed as may seem a heavy heart. Woe to many a thane, who weeps in his mind over the treasure-giver. Now lieth low the hand which availed you well for every kind of pleasure. I heard land-dwellers and hall-counsellors and my people say that they saw two such monstrous march-steppers, alien sprites, holding the moorland, and one of them was in the likeness of a woman, as far as they could tell. The other, shapen wretchedly, trod the path of exiles in the form of a man, except that he was greater than any other man, he whom in former days the earth-dwellers called by name Grendel. They knew not his father, whether any secret sprite was formerly born of him. They kept guard over the hidden land, and the wolf-slopes, the windy nesses, the terrible fen-path where the mountain streams rush down under mists of the nesses, the floods under the earth. And it is not further hence than the space of a mile, where standeth the lake, over which are hanging the frosted trees, their wood fast by the roots, and shadowing the water. And there every night one may see dread wonders, fire on the flood. And there liveth not a wise man of the children of men who knoweth well the ground. Nevertheless the heath-stepper, the strong-horned hart, when pressed by the hounds seeketh that woodland, when put to flight from afar, ere on the hillside, hiding his head he gives up his life. Nor is that a canny place, for thence the surge of waters riseth up wan to the welkin when stirred by the winds, the loathsome weather, until the heaven darkens and skies weep. Now is good counsel depending on thee alone. Thou knowest not the land, the terrible places where thou couldst find the sinful man. Seek it if thou darest. I will reward thee for the feud with old-world treasures, so I did before, with twisted gold if thou comest thence on thy way. Beowulf spake, the son of Ecgtheow. Sorrow not, O wise man. It is better for each one to avenge his friend when he is much mourning. Each one of us must wait for the end of his world life. Let him work who may, ere the doom of death come, that is afterwards best for the noble dead. Arise, O ward of the kingdom. Let us go forth quickly to trace out the going of Grendel's kinswoman. I bid thee do it, for neither in the bosom of the earth, nor in forests of the mountains, nor by the ways of the sea, go where she will, shall she escape into safety. Do thou this day be patient in every kind of trouble, as I also hope to be. The old man leapt up and gave thanks to God, the mighty Lord, for the words of Beowulf. Then was bridled a horse for Hrothgar, a steed with twisted hair, and as a wise prince he went forth in splendid array. The troop of shield warriors marched along, and the traces were widely seen in the forest ways, the goings of Grendel's mother over the ground. Forwards she had gone over the murky moorlands, and had borne in her grasp, bereft of his soul, the best of the thanes, who were wont to keep watch over Hrothgar's homestead. Then Beowulf, the Ithling's child, stepped o'er the steep and stony slopes and the narrow pathways, and the strained single tracks, an unknown way, by the steep nesses, and by many a sea monster's cavern. And one of the wise men went on before to seek out the path, until all at once he found some mountain trees, overhanging the grey stones, a forest all joyless, and underneath was a water all, blood-stained and troubled, and a grievous thing it was for all the Danes to endure for the friends of the Scyldings, and for many a thane, and distressful to all the earls, when they came upon the head of Aesir on the cliffs above the sea. The flood boiled with blood, and with hot gore the folk looked upon it, and at times the horn sounded a battle song ready prepared. All the troops sat down, and many kinds of serpents they saw in the water, and wonderful dragons searching the sea, and on the cliff slopes monsters of the ocean were lying at full length, who at the morning tide often make a woeful journey on the sail path, and snakes and wild beasts they could see also. And these living things fell down on the path all bitter and angry, when they perceived the noise and the blast of the war horn. And the prince of the Geats killed one of them with his bow and arrows, and ended his wave strife. And he was in the sea, slower at swimming as death swept him away. And on the waves, by fierce battle hard pressed, with boar spears savagely barbed, the wondrous sea monster was assailed in the struggle, and drawn up on the headland. And men were looking at the awful stranger. And Beowulf put on him his armor, that was fitting for an earl, and by no means did he lament over his life, for the hand-woven coat of mail, which was ample and of many colors, was destined to explore the deeps, and knew well how to defend his body, so that neither battle grip nor the hostile grasp of the treacherous one might scathe breast or life. And the white helmet thereof warded his head, that which was destined to search out the bottom of the sea and the welter of waters, and which was adorned with treasures and encircled with noble chains, wondrously decked and set round with boar images, as in days of yore a weaponsmith had made it for him, so that no brand nor battle sword could bite him. And by no means was that the least of aids in battle that the spokesman of Hrothgar lent him at need, even the hilted sword which was called Runting, and it was one of the ancient treasures. Its edge was of iron, and poison-tipped, and hardened in battle sweat, and never did it fail in the fight any man who brandished it in his hands, or who dared to go on fearful journeys to the field of battle. And that was not the first time that it was to do deeds of courage. And Unferth did not think, he the kinsman of Ecglaf, crafty of strength, of what he formerly had said when drunken with wine. He had lent that weapon to a braver sword warrior. He himself durst not risk his life in the stress of the waters and do a glorious deed. But thus was it not with that other, for he had got himself ready for the battle.